Good morning, John.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining me today for this, brief discussions of different trends in ed tech space in B2B marketing. And I am very happy to have you here with me today.
I'm very excited to talk to you today. This will be fun.
Okay, so let me start with a brief intro. And John is probably the most experienced marketer I've ever spoken to. So John, and this is a rare case when the person actually moved from television to the internet and to digital marketing. And John started his career in DoubleClick, and probably one of the first ad tech companies out there.
Correct.
And over the last few years, John actually works with a very unique niche, like hardware companies, hardware B2B companies. And I'd love to discuss our conversation with this particular question. So could you please tell me a little bit about specific of working in this narrow niche?
Sure. So the area, even more specifically, is semiconductors. And that's been in the news quite a bit, actually. If you've been following that, it's a huge deal and a huge trend. So I got involved with that. To kind of back up, as you mentioned, I was with DoubleClick. Eventually, I worked my way to where I started my own little company, NetGains. And as part of that, I became involved with a large semiconductor company, really big, one of the major players in the industry. And I helped develop their lead generation program, and working with people that were on the inside of the company. We developed a number of programs, lead generation being the most complicated and definitely the hardest thing that we did. And we did some awareness, and we did the various other things that you would anticipate that you would do as part of paid. And I'm, just to be very clear, I'm on the paid side of the equation. I know enough about SEO to be dangerous, as they say, and I follow it closely because the two are so closely linked that I don't think you can do one and ignore the other. So I was very fortunate. I had a really good SEO partner at the time, who's a tremendous leader in the field. I'll mention her name, Motoka Hunt. And a lot of people know who she is, and she's just great. And so the two of us then combined to put this program together with this big company. And so, yeah, it was extremely challenging. I still have them as a client. It's now been over 15 years. So apparently we did something reasonably well. And yeah, it was incredibly challenging.
Okay, John, so you mentioned that it's mostly about paid. So I'm interested to learn more about your experience working with semiconductors producers. So is it more about like social or display? And maybe my next question would be about, okay, what tools do you use, and do you use any automation in your workflow, and how many stakeholders you have during the process, so how you structure this communication workflow as well?
Wow, there's a lot to answer there. So let me go back. So let me try to explain how this happened and how I got reasonably good at it. And one of the things that I had to learn the business. I had to, in the one thing I would sort of, as an answer to your question, is research is so critical. I think too few companies emphasize that enough. They just want to run ads, and okay, I understand there's a lot of pressure to get things going, but at the core of what made me different, and I think one of the reasons this company chose to work with me, and they had other choices, obviously, that we were up against at the time 2 other really large companies, and at the time I was partnered with a very small company. There were 14 of us, and we were up against companies with 500 and 600 people involved. And one of the reasons they chose us is because we said, well, wait a minute, we're going to really focus on what you guys do and learn about the business. And we really did fall through on that. So to answer your question about tools, I use a lot of anything that will give me more information. So any tools, right from doing just simple searches. SEMrush was really helpful for a time. Your tool was helpful for creating ads, because eventually what ended up happening is we had to do a little bit of everything. So it wasn't just running the ads. It was it was paid, and so we did a lot of paid advertising. But we had to, in many cases, create ads. We had to do creative. We ended up getting involved, or I did, with content creation, and that was another thing that was really central, became central to the success of this program, was understanding that connection and helping the company choose the right collateral to run in our programs. And so I had to really understand what that collateral said. And I'm about the furthest thing from a design engineer you'll ever meet. I was a history major and a German minor, and I couldn't do the math, that's associated with semiconducting at all. But what I could do eventually was read collateral and understand the concepts behind it.
Yeah, so I believe, the audience of your client is very unique one, right? So, okay, who buys semiconductors? Maybe hardware companies, right? So basically, and probably your message should be very technical and very specific. And I'm thinking about, okay, you say that you use some tools to design ads. So as far as I understand, your customer provides you with some assets, and you are able to assemble them in any different way, right? So like you assemble different say visual content. And can you probably speak a little bit about this? Because again, first, it's very unique because the niche is, I would suggest it's not so big, and you should speak right to the target audience, and then like how this creative should look at all to take
Yep.
some attention.
And let me go backwards a little bit too and explain a little bit what happened, because it was kind of a unique situation. So first, let me answer your question. So our audience is design engineers or electrical engineers that work generally for fairly large companies, not always. And they are looking at, to your point, they're looking most often for really technical information. They want to design a chip or a system. And so therefore, that's what they're most interested in. At least that's what our experience told us. The second thing that happened that was very noteworthy is we started off using paid search. So, going to Google, putting in a keyword, getting a result, and then we would buy the ads. And in the course of doing all that, we saw that Google was had the ability to run their display network. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice, of course. So I decided we should test this. We should test running on the display network, which meant creating image ads and not just text. So we moved away from search, started using Google Display Network, and used what they call their responsive display ads, which require a lot of different images, and found that worked really well. And despite everybody being skeptical at first, everyone said that'll never work. And we found, no, it works really well. We were able to cut the cost per lead by like 2/3 by doing that. So we started that, 12 years ago, maybe longer, despite there was a lot of initial pushback. But when people saw what the results were, like, okay, well, this is really good. So therefore, I ended up adopting your tool, the Viewst tool, to help create some of those ads, because in some cases, while I was given certain assets, I couldn't run them as they were. I had to manipulate them a little bit in terms of size. There were other things I had to do in order to actually conform to the standards that Google wanted on the display network. And so I ended up doing a lot of that. You asked about stakeholders, and that was another thing that was very challenging, because when you're working with such a large company, it's like working with 12 companies. So they're all slightly different. They all have, one manufactures ADCs, which are analog to digital converters. Another one does MEMS, which are sensors. There's a whole RF group, radio frequency, which is completely different. And so another challenge was to learn a little bit about each of these technologies, because the people buying those various designs and chips, they all have different interests. They're all not the same. You can't run the same ad to an RF person as you would to somebody interested in the sensor. So it was a lot of work to understand each of these technologies and how they might fit together. So that was another thing that we had to do.
Okay, and let me switch slightly. Like you mentioned that you like the combination of display and search optimization. And what do you think? Like, I'm seeing a trend that so-called like zero-click search, right? Can you like I can see that you relate to it. So can you maybe speak about like what you think about this trend? Is it growing, and how it affects the combination of like approaches you take, like search optimization, bearing in mind this like zero-click search plus display ads?
Well, this gets really complicated. So if we were to have had this conversation 2 weeks ago, it would be completely different than the one I'm about to have with you now. So let's explain quickly what zero-click search means. It was a term coined by Rand Fishkin, who was a fantastic SEO expert. And what he started to notice or comment on was the fact that people would go to Google, put in a query, get a result, but because there was information on that result page that actually answered that question, the person would leave. They wouldn't click any of the blue links, so to speak. And so he started to note that. And then there was a study that came out by SEMrush just a couple of years ago, maybe it was a year ago, that said they did a more of a data intensive study and said, yeah, about 26% of people doing the search go away without clicking anything. Okay, so that's interesting. But now lately, here's what's been happening. And literally within the last week, ChatGPT has changed everything. So it was the fastest adopted technology ever. Within the first 5 days of it coming out to the public, it hit 1 million users. And right now, I think the last statistic I read that says it gets 1.6 billion visits monthly. And so this is starting to change everything about that. So as you probably have heard, Google suddenly had to have a code red meeting about this and figure out what they were going to do. And so let's kind of cut to the bottom line here. So what people are thinking now is this could replace search. Maybe this is going to replace people going to search engines. I don't know. It's too early. What I'm going to say is it's too early to say how this is going to play out. But for example, Google has just introduced something called SGE, Search Generative Experience. So they are putting an AI response within their search, and supposedly they're now rolling it out to everybody. It was in Google Labs, and now and so how is this going to work? And a lot of question marks. So to answer your question about what do you do about it, right? And my answer is sort of what we were doing before, is you really have to understand your audience, understand what they want, and you may have to find, I don't know if finding other sources of traffic is maybe the right way to put this, but you're going to have to watch very carefully if search is going to change, and how that's going to change, and how is that going to impact putting ads on search. And really honestly, a lot of people are speculating right now, but no one's really quite sure. It is breathtaking how fast this has been changing.
I totally agree. And I'm happy that you mentioned actually ChatGPT. So basically what I hear that so far we are just on a sideways trying to figure out what's going on. And like we don't significantly affect maybe this combination of search plus display. So we are just maybe observing what's going on and what are new instruments to boost our traffic. But since we mentioned like ChatGPT, and you do some assembling of your visual assets, have you tried or have you seen this new disruptive technology adoption in creative production? And do you find it already kind of a high quality so you can rely on it and use it like regularly, or it's still an experiment and you just keep on like your feet on the ground to understand what's going on?
Yeah, it's still fairly new. So I have been using it to create ads in addition to everything else that's been going on, to answer your question. But at the same time, it's still so new that maybe it's just me. I don't know that I would completely rely on it to create an ad right now. I definitely want to look at it first to see, okay, how is this going to look before I fully automate it, everything. And I'm a little bit of a control person anyway. So, so for me, it's hard to just give everything over. So yeah, you create them all and we'll just put them in. I like to look at, okay, what are we really displaying? What does it really look like? But I think ultimately, yeah, we will see a lot more of that in terms of how AI will fit into creating ads for sure. And by the way, Google's been doing this for a long time. Go in, and we knew about this even 10 years ago. When you go in to create a Google ad, for example, if you've done this, we've seen people do this, it will start giving suggested headlines, suggested descriptions. It actually, I think Google's known for a very long time how this might play out. But they were also fearful of letting the genie out of the bottle, so to speak. And Microsoft just went ahead and said, we have nothing to lose here. We're getting killed on search. We don't care. Here, we're going to let you guys go ahead and do this. And Google got caught. I mean, they really got caught kind of napping on this one a little bit. So they're playing catch up now.
I totally agree. Marketing probably was one of the first, and maybe even the first industry who actually adopted. Okay, let's be very specific and call it artificial narrow intelligence. So it was utilized in media buying, like data-driven. So we used all these algorithms in our media buying and inventory selling, right? So it's been a decade already. And for marketing, and probably now if you see all these charts, you see that marketing is the industry who adopted the most of this new disruptive technology.
Absolutely.
So I totally understand. And Google wasn't the only one. So Facebook did the same with, they use a lot of data and they are very good at it. And I'm now thinking more of, okay, like when we are talking about responsive ads, it's just, one part, like one side of the coin of display ads. But then we have brands who invest tons of money in their creative appearance, right? They don't want to look similar as like coffee shop around the corner. Like for some purposes, when you need conversions, it's a good way, right, to invest your marketing budgets. But also you do like always on awareness campaigns where means a lot. And yeah, I would agree with you that in this part we are probably far from relying on algorithms purely, bearing in mind their we call it they dream, right? So they might
hallucinate.
They might add some kind of inappropriate, right, content into your asset, and that's a bit scaring. So I would agree that we are at the very beginning, but observing what like Pika, for instance, does with video, which is like mind-blowing. It's probably not widely spread. And again, I tried it too myself, and what I've learned that maybe if you have a designer background and you can be very, very precise in writing your prompt, you should get a better result.
Right.
But being like a non-professional designer, of course, like on my videos and short videos, they were completely clumsy. But I believe it's going to get much better, as you said, and quite quickly. Okay, so Jon, that's I would call it an interview because like we do a series of quite a short videos. But what I've learned from this conversation, that first of all, that targeting a very, very narrow niche of like customers, you could build a very profitable and sustainable business, being a marketing agency. And like similarly to all new businesses and even tech startups, the narrower your niche, like you are targeting, the more successful and more fast you are going to grow, because you should understand this customer profile very, very well. So similarly in marketing, and good to know. And that like in order to be successful, you should really understand your customer. to speak same language. And as far as I understand,
Exactly.
this is the most important thing. And then again, there are so many tools out there that you can basically automate any part of your process these days, and technology is being of a great help to marketers in delivering good results.
Exactly. Yeah, I would say that the biggest takeaway, really know your customer. I mean, and know their products and know them almost better than they do. And that will really, to get really good results. And that's not easy. That's not an easy thing to do. I mean, and you're right, there's a lot of great tools, but be careful not to take too many shortcuts. You really need to understand that in my opinion, right now. Could change, but right now, even today, really understanding what they do, why they do it, doing the research, doing the really hard work to understand that is really the way to be successful.
Jon, thank you so much. And, I believe it's not our last conversation, and I'll be really happy to invite you in like maybe in a few months, and we'll see how actually the trend is evolving and what technology managed to deliver to our industry. And once again, thanks for being with me today, and I wish you a great day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Okay, I stop recording, but
Okay.
I'm not saying goodbye to you.